Potter were on the top of Taf Lamed Aleph Amid Beis, so he picked up a kiss in order to steal it, and in order to take it out into Rishus Harab. Although some point in time after he picked up the kiss, he stopped. However, he stopped Lakatif. And since he stopped Lakatif, he was not Oker, the original Akira is still alive and well. And simultaneous with that Akira, which was a Tzorach HaNochen, according to Rabbi Yovin's principle, that if an Akira is a Tzorach HaNochen, then any Chiv moment that he incurs at the time of the Akira is knocked off through Kimle B'Derabim. Is either Tani, why did the Bryce have to stretch its arm out? Tell you, Megar v'yotze, part the liflog, the listening b'didav, Avedram would be omid lafrish. And omid lafrish, he took a rest, he took a break and an interruption, and therefore he was mavatal the original Akira. So therefore he's chayav for Gneva, and he's got a second Akira that's going to generate a chiyuv hotzah after he takes his rest. But the omed avol the omed lokatev, then he hasn't been mevatel the original Akira. The original Akira, Nomi Lakatev, is still alive and well and active, and therefore you have simultaneity between the Hagba Hamachayeves Momon and the Akira Hamachayeves Otzah. So he's got a Chiv Momon and a Chiv Bisa both at the same moment, and therefore will apply the principle of Kim Rabbaneh, and he doesn't have to pay for the kiss. So at this point, the Gemara is really stuck. We really don't understand how to answer and defend Rabbi Oven in the light of this price, because if Rabbi Oven is correct, having formulated the principle of Akira L'Tzorach HaNocha, and therefore any Chiyuv Mammon that he incurs at the time of the Akira is knocked off by the Chiyuv Mammon, then why did the Bryce have to tell me that he was Gor V'Yotze? Forget about Gor V'Yotze. Why don't you just tell me that he was only L'Katev? If he was only L'Katev, or for that matter, he wasn't Omed at all, and he did in one flow continuous mice of Akira Nanocha, then he'd be Potter. Hello, says the Gemara, Homani, to whom can we attribute the authorship of this price? Ben Azai, the Mahalik, Ben Azai holds that every time you take a step, and there's a fraction of a second in which you are nach, because you put your foot down on the ground. Again, we don't see it because we look at it as if it's flowing, it's moving. But there is 1 second that he puts his foot down on the ground in order to project himself forward. And at that second, says Ben Azai, he has anoch. So therefore, what happens is that every time he puts a step down, according to Ben Azai, and then he goes forward, he starts with a brand new Akira. So he has now cut himself off from the original Akira. And the reason why the Brisa says that he's Patur, the reason why the Brisa says he's Chayav in the Reisha is because at time T1, when he lifted up the kiss in the Rishus Bailam, he incurred a Chiyuv, Gneva Midin Hagba, and a Chiyuv Misa for Hotzah is going to come exactly at the second that he crosses over the boundary between Rishus Hayach and Rishus Harabim. When he lifts up his foot after putting it down, that's going to be his Akira. So once again, the Gemara is going to go back to the methodology of Liflog V'Lisnei B'Lidah, because now we can differentiate between Halicha okay, it doesn't say the word Halicha, but we're referring to Halicha and Zrika, because Ben Azai doesn't say a word about Zrika. When Ben Azai has these multiple Akiros, and every time he puts his foot down, it's Hanocha followed by a new Akira, that's only in a case of Halicha. But in a case of Zrika, it's one continuous flow. So therefore, we're going to have a liflog, the listening b'didav. The Zorek, my patur, is liflog, the listening b'didav, amen of Armurim, b'mahalech. Okay, that's where I got the word halicha from. Aval b'zorek patur. Now, I'm a little bit confused about one little point. It's a technical point. Even in the case of Zrika, isn't there a fraction of a time difference between when he lifted up the kiss and when he threw it? How do you get simultaneity here? In the case of Zorek, he should be patur. Let me just see if by chance and nobody mentions it. So let's just think about it for a second. So again, let me just review the steps here on the top of Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Beis. We're saying the following. Principle number one is that if he was Omed Lakate, if he doesn't break up the tziruf to the original Akira is still active, and therefore we would apply the principle of Kimlei B'Deramin. Principle number two is that Liflog Velisne B'Nida is going to yell out and scream to us, why did the Brisa force itself to come up with a case of Gor V'Yotze, and there he's Chayiv? Why not say he's Chayiv and Omed Lakate? I'm sorry. Why not say that he's Potter in the case of Omed Lakate? So then we're going to introduce Ben Azai. And again, we're going to have a problem of Liflog Velisne B'Nida, because the Gemara says that in Zorek, Ben Azai is Modeh, that there's one Akira, there's no multiple Akiros. And therefore, he has a simultaneity in both the Hagbas HaChefetz and the Chiyuv Gneva, and the Akiras HaChefetz with Tzorach Hotzah. So the Gemara answers, Megara v'yotze itztrichle. We're about 8 lines down from the top. Megara v'yotze itztrichle. There's a special chiddush that the Brisa wants to teach us in the case where he drags the object out of the reshus of the bailim in order to steal it. We have a principle in Hilchos Shabbos called Meleches Machshavos, which means when you do a malach any of the 39, you have to do it the normal way. If a person drags something on the floor, that's normally a very, very second-rate way of relocating an object. You know, the better way would be to either carry it or throw it. And the Gemara has a whole diyun about the old Bedouin women. You know, you still see them out there in the desert. You know, they carry things on their head, whether that's called derech hotzah or not. If, for example, you would carry something in your left hand instead of your right hand, or let's say you carry it behind you instead of in front of you, there are many different ways in which you can carry something that's shalok kederech hotzah, and I would think that megar v'yotze is shalok kederech hotzah, and therefore he would not be chayiv on Shabbos. And the Brisa says he's potter for paying tashluma because he's chayiv on Shabbos. Is kamash malon. You see that even greira, although greira dragging something is unusual, but it still is common, and it's common enough to make it into derech hotzah. So Gemara says the following: if you want to know whether it's normal and customary to drag an object or unusual, it really depends upon the weight of the object, the size of the object. An object that's very bulky, Gemara says, if it's a very bulky object, very heavy, then instead of lifting it, you drag it. I mean, we're now in the process of dragging boxes of sfarim, heavy boxes, out there. And very often we have to just push them on the floor. We can't lift them up. They're so heavy. So the Gemara is basically saying, Pshita, I don't need a chiddush in the Brisa and the sefer the Brisa of Gor V'Yotze that it's Chai Mishum Shabbos and Potter Mishum Gneva, because I could have had a scenario in which he threw it, but you want to tell me, well, I want to be mechayish to you that it's still considered derech hotzah. Of course it's derech hotzah, but b'ravare pshita it's derech hotzah. Ela b'mitzion. Gemara says that we're talking about, skip. Ibizutra, if it's a small pocketbook, lavurchehu, then for sure it should be potur from Meleches Shabbos, and it's shalom kedarko, and it would not knock off in any way the chiyuv mamon for gneva. Ela b'mitzion, it's a middle range pocketbook. It's like my wife's pocketbook before she uses it. After she uses it, it becomes Rav. I never understood how she carries around her pocket. I didn't want it's too heavy for me. But in any event, we have something called Mitzvah. So on the one hand, most people would probably carry it. It's still Mitzvah. It's not Rav. But on the other hand, some people would drag it. And that's the Chiddush, that's still within the parameters of Derech Hotzah. With the Afki Lehecha, when this Ganav in the safe of the Bryce is carrying it out, where is he carrying it to? Idi Afki L'Shusarabim. I don't understand. We're talking about a Chiyuv Ganav without any Agbah, which means that as a substitute replacement of Agbah, he can be Kona the Gneva by taking it from one Rishus to another. But basically, he has to take it into his own private domain. Is Ilir Shusarabim, he takes it out to Shusarabim, okay. Isa Shabbos Ika, I understand that he's Chayef Hotzah, Rishus HaYochel, Rishus HaRabim, but Isa Gneva Leka, you're telling me that the Isa Shabbos is going to knock off a Chiv Gneva, which would have obligated him to pay for the Gneva, if not for the fact that he's Chayav Misa. Why would he pay for the Gneva in that case? Isa Gneva Leka. And the reason for that is, as the Gemara is going to say later on in the name of Rav Acha, that Meshicha Eina Kona B'Shus HaRabim. The Kinyan here of Greira is called the Kinyan Meshicha, and he's got to take it by dragging it into his Rishus, but not into a public domain. And if, on the other hand, the Afke Rishus HaYachid, so it means that the Chatzer of the Ganav is contiguous to the Chatzer of the Bailim, so he's just dragging it over the line from his friend's Chatzer, not such a good friend apparently, into his Chatzer. Is Isa Gneva Ika. I understand very well that in that case he made a Kinyan Meshicha by taking it to his own Rishus, and even Rav Acha would agree that qualifies as Meshicha Mechayeves B'Gneva, but Isa Shabbos Leka, right? Because Shabbos means not you took it from one Rishus HaYachid to another Rishus HaYachid, but from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. He never took it out to Rishus HaRabim. So how do we envision a scenario in which Hayamagara V'Yotze, he's going to be chayav for taking the object by dragging it for both Gneva and Fotzah? It doesn't work out. If it's going to be Gneva, then he has to take it into another Chatzah. If it's Mishum Shabbos, he has to take it to Rishus HaRabim. So if he takes from one Chatzah to the other, there's no Chiyuv Shabbos. If he takes it to Rishus HaRabim, there's no Chiyuv Gneva. And the Gemara says, I have that middle of the road, with an overlap of Chiyuv Gneva and Chiyuv Meleches Hotzah. And that is the Afke L'Tzidei Rishus HaRabim. Now we have a takana in Hilchas Kinyanim called a Simta. And a Simta is an area that is in Rishus HaRabim, but it's off to the side. Like people go there to, fix up the agalot, the wagons and so forth and so on. And now we have something called Tzidei Rishus HaRabim. What they do is, people who own homes that at the front of the house, the face of the house, will border on a public domain. What they did was, in order to avoid people from, bumping into their houses and possibly pushing it down, like my father's log cabin, where he was raised for the first 12 years of his life in Poland. So they did a Tzidei Rishus HaRabim. They put up like different poles and so forth, to indicate that people shouldn't go into that area. And the Gemara is now holding that technically the status of Tzidei Rishus HaRabim is both a privately owned area and a publicly owned area. As far as Gneva is concerned, it's considered private, because most people don't go in there. And it's meant to protect the homeowners. And therefore you can consider it Gneva when he takes it out of the house and puts it in the Tzidei Rishus HaRabim. But on the other hand, from a Shabbos perspective, it's considered Rishus HaRabim, because according to the laws of the city, anyone's allowed to go in there. So Gemara says, Kiman, on this issue of the status of Tzidei Rishus HaRabim, we have a major machlokas tanoim. If In other words, Rabbi Eliezer identified Tzidei Rishus Rabim as full-fledged Rishus Rabim. Isur Shabbos Ikri Gneva Nileka. Again, he kept Chai for Gneva, he didn't take it into a private domain. And we're holding now like Ravacha, that there's no Kinyan Gneva in Rishus Rabim. And if Ikar Abonat Yamik Tlushus of Lav Rishus Rabim is Isur Gneva Ika Isur Shabbos Leka, right? We're talking about a place that could serve and function as a Kinyan Gana because the private domain. If it's the private domain, then you're not Chai for Shabbos. And now the Gemara is going to come up with that overlap that we spoke about earlier. Li Olam Rabbi Eliezer, V'chiyom Rabbi Eliezer Tzidei Rishus Rabim K'Rishus Rabim Domiani B'Lin Chiyuv Shabbos. Since people technically have the right to go there, and if indeed there's an overflow of traffic of people walking, they will push into the Tzidei Rishus Rabim. That makes it an extension of Rishus Rabim as far as Shabbos is concerned. Many times the Rabbim will be pushed into that area. I don't know if you've ever been at a funeral of like a major Gadol B'Yisrael. I remember I was literally pushed off the main road. There were too many people in there, very dangerous. As far as kinyanim are concerned, it's enough to say that most people would not go there. It's not generally used. It's only used in those occasions when it's dochi be'rab. By time of the lo shchichi be'rab. Rav Ashi says that I have another way of reconciling this brisa. Kigon shetzeref yado lemata mishlocha bekibla. So the man was dragging the object that he was stealing, and he pushed it from one hand and caught it in another hand. Now, you're going to ask, wait a second. He may have pushed it into his hand, and that constitutes a Geneva, but where's his hand? His hand is in Rishus Rabim, correct? So what does it mean to make a kinyan? We're holding now like Ravacha that there's no kinyan of Geneva in Rishus Rabim. So lamata mishlosha is considered munach al Rishus Rabim as far as Shabbos is concerned. However, as far as Geneva is concerned, his yad is considered a separate area cut off from Rishus Rabim, and therefore it's Mashicha into Rishus HaYochid. His hand itself becomes Rishus HaYochid. To the Rav, the Yomar Rava Yado Shel Adam Chashuva Ke Arbal Arb. In other words, when you hold on to something in your hand, that's considered like 4 tefachim on 4 tefachim. It doesn't matter what size his hand is. You know, his hand is unlikely, unless he's Og Melech HaBashan, to be Dalet al Dalet tefachim, but nevertheless it has a status of Dalet al Dalet tefachim. For example, the Mishnah at the beginning of Masechet Shabbos, what happens is that the Ashir puts something into the hands, some money into the hands of the Ani. The Ani is outside in Rishus Rabim. The moment that the Ashir puts down the object into the hand of the Ani who's standing out in Rishus Rabim, he's chayav mishum melechas hotzah. You need hotzah, you need a hanoch al gabi mokum dalet dalet. The hand is considered dalet al dalet. Is memela, you could be chayav for meleches hotzah by putting it in your hand, meaning you pushed it from one hand to the other, he caught it in his second hand, and his second hand is in Rishus Rabim in the sense it's below Gimel Tfachim, that's called Lavud. The Rishus Rabim, the Karka, goes up to 3 Tfachim. And he's going to be Chayav Mishum Geneva because the Yad is a separate entity, and it's not bottled to Rishus Rabim. So since a Yad has the status of a Makom Choshev as far as Meleches Hotzah Shabbos is concerned, therefore as far as Kinyanim are concerned, the Gemara makes that equation of Ashi, it's considered a Makom, and it could be Konebo as if it was his own personal Chatzah. And he's Chayav Mishum Meleches Hotzah because in effect he put it down into a Yad, which is below 3 Tfachim Rishus Rabim, And that yad has the status of a mokum chashuv, daled al daled. It's part of Rosh Hashanah because it's 3 tefachim close, less than 3 tefachim away from the car. Rav Acha masni hoch. Everything that we've been saying until now is according to Rav Acha. Because Rav Acha is of the opinion, and we'll see exactly where he derives it from, that a kinyan gneva and kinyanim in general cannot take place in a Rosh Hashanah. Ravino masni liolam liafkir Rosh Hashanah nami kana. Forget about all these complications and all these somersaults in the air with these various scenarios. Let him take it out to Rosh Hashanah. Once he takes it out to Rosh Hashanah, he's chayav mishum gneva, and he can be kona by taking something out of the Rosh Hashanah and putting it down in a Rosh Hashanah. V'tarvayu b'diyuka daha mastitza kamiflagi. They're arguing about how to read a Mishnah in Masechet Bava Kama in Tes. Tisnan v'yamoshcho v'yotze umes. He was leading out an ox from the corral of his friend for purposes of Geneva. And as he's taking the shor out, it dies in the Rosh Hashanah. And he's potter. In other words, Meshicha is not Kone versus Bailam. Only Hagbah is Kone versus Ram. Here he didn't do Hagbah. The shor weighs 5 tons. He can only drag the shor. And dragging is a Meshicha. And Meshicha is not Kone versus Habailam. Higbio. And now we say there's a difference between Meshicha and Hagbah. Meshicha doesn't work versus Bailim. No kinyonim versus Bailim other than Hagbah. But if you lifted it up, again, I don't know how he's going to lift the shor, but let's say he had some sort of machine and he lifts up the shor, then he's chayav mishum gneva. And if the animal drops dead, he has to pay for the animal. Because a ganav is chayav owns. Oh, here's another alternative. Hotzio mishus bailim. He was able to drag the shor out of the mishus bailim and it died. Umes chayav. Okay, let's see 2 diuk. Ravina daik mi reisha, Rav Acha daik mi. Ravina daik mi reisha. It says in the reisha hayam moshcha v'yotze umes b'shus bailim. Potur. Why is he potur? Because the animal died b'shus bailim. The implication is clearly that time of the mace b'shus bailim ha hotzio b'shus bailim umes chayav. If he would have successfully taken it out of the b'shus bailim and then it died, he'd be chayav. In other words, he took the Ganav took the object out of the Rishus Bailim, and according to Ravina, that's enough. It doesn't matter where he's taking it into, even if he takes it into Rishus Rabim, it doesn't matter. He makes the kinyan, and it's considered as if he took it into his own Rishus the very moment he takes it out of the Rishus of the Bailim. Rav Acha diik mi seifa. In the Sefer it says Bio o shehotzio. When is he chayfa onsim? If either he was able to get a crane and lift up the shor in Rishus Bailim, or he took it out of Rishus Bailim. And now Rav Acha introduces a kind of a hekech. When the Mishnah gives 2 examples separated by the word "o," then we assume an analogy between those 2 cases. They're all on the same level. Hotzah dumya dagba. Right, these are the cases in which he's chayiv if the animal dies, hagba or hotzah. Ma hagba diasalir shusei. When is hagba? Or I should say, why is hagba meaningless as a kinyan? What's the yisodas v'shorish hagba as a kinyan? It's asilur shusei. Lifting it up means he's got possession over it. Is hotzah nami? When we said he took it out, the asilur shusei, he's got to take it into his rishus. The whole essence of kinyan gneva is when he takes it into rishus. If he takes it to Sarabim, says Rav Acha, that's nothing. The Rav Acha kasha Rachel or Ravina kasha Seifa. So these diukim now become mutually problematic for the other shita. Rachel or Rav Acha lo kasha. The Reisha is not going to be problematic according to Rav Acha. that the Reisha seems to assume that Kol Tzia Rishus Bailam Kana, even if he took it into Rishus Ram. No. Rishus Bailam Karina Bay. When the Mishnah in the Reisha says he has to take it out of Rishus Bailam to be Chayav, it means he's got to take it out to a place which he can call his own Rishus. If it's Rishus Harabin, then Rishus Bailam Karina. Again, why is it called Rishus Bailam? It's not really Rishus Bailam, it's Rishus Harabin. But it means it's not the Ganav's own Rishus. If it's not the Ganav's own Rishus, then it's basically the Nignav's Rishus. So imagine you have a Rishus HaYochid here that belongs to Reuven. Then you have a Rishus HaRabin. And then you have a Rishus HaYochid that belongs to Shimon. So Rav Acha is saying that in order for Shimon to effectuate a meaningful and valid Kinyan Geneva, all he has to do is he has to take it not only out of Reuven's Rishus, but also out of the Rishus HaRabim, and take it, Shimon, into his Rishus. So what that means is that the Rishus HaRabim in the middle still belongs to it. It's an extension of the Rishus of Reuven. Sefer Ravina Lokasha, and he never had this methodological principle in the literary translation of the Brisos and the Mishnayos that you could make this kind of occasion called Dumya. It doesn't have to be Dumya. Now, at this point, we're going to begin a new sugya. I should really leave it for tomorrow, but let's just get a haskalah. I always like to be a little ahead of myself. The Mishnah says that in all these cases, if he has relations with a Chiv Karetz and a Nida and so forth and so on, and he was Ma'anis, then he's Chayav. Knas, Uraminu, I'll ask you a steer from Masechet Makos. And the Mishnah says in Masechet Makos, Elu Hein Halokin. When do you get Malchus? In other words, if there was Asra, so in all these cases, he's Chayav Malchus. Now you're telling me in our Mishnah that he's Chayav Knas. How could that be? Here on Lamed Beis, Kaimalon to Eino Loka Mishalim. So even though the Chiyav Kares is not enough to knock off Knas, but everybody agrees that the Chiyav Malchus is enough to knock off Knas. That's called Eino Loka Mishalim. And that's what he writes here in the note, that the Mishnah is saying that Chayvei Lavim, like Mamzeres and so forth, Yeshlam Knas, and Kaimalon Deino Loka Mishalim. So if in, let's say, Mamzeres, which is Chayvei Lavim, the Mishnah says that he has to pay Knas, that's a problem because Deino Loka Mishalim. And in case of Balachoso, if, let's say, it was one for Malchus, the Chiyuv Malchus should knock off the Chiyuv Malchus. And this leads us to Ula here on the top of Lamed Beis, which Amir Hashem we can accomplish at Lineder at 9:45. Actually, you know what? Let's make it. Maybe we'll make it a little earlier tomorrow because I'm still preparing for Sunday. Let's call for 9 o'clock. Is that all right? Does that sound good? It's like a round number. Yeah. Okay, Belina, any change, I'll notify. Okay, then, so have a great day.